You guys asked some amazing questions, and I really appreciate it when you ask it in the comments here in the channel, because then everybody can learn from the answer. When you just come up to me at like an event or send me an email or whatever and ask me a question, the only person that learns is you. And to me, this career is all about helping the writers that are coming up behind you so that we all have more good books to read. And by the way, why should you listen to me? Because I bet a lot of people think that when they first turn on the video. I don't know this woman. Why should I listen to her? I'll just pop my little credentials up here. All of that, however, was earned through extremely hard work, a lot of rejections, and a whole lot of life lessons that taught me how to dig deeper into my book in order to create something amazing. And that's what I'm trying to bring to you guys every week here. Every week, a little dose of courage, a little dose of you can do it, and a whole lot of education, because when you know how it works and you know how to put it together, the whole process becomes a lot easier. So I'm going to answer a handful of really good questions on this video today. The Callipolis asked a great question. They said AI is inundating the marketplace and taking over and writing all these books. And that is true, that AI is doing that. And it kind of seems like there's no point in writing and I'm about to lose heart. Now, first of all, big hugs, because I get it. And honestly, I have been in your space in a different way many years ago. When I first started out trying to get published and I was sending out book after book after book that got rejected, ebooks became a thing. And all of a sudden, everybody was self-publishing, which meant anybody could produce anything and put it out there. In the beginning, there weren't a lot of ebooks. So the ones that got picked up and bought and made people that I know tons and tons of money were not necessarily very well written, because it was a novelty and people thought it was really cool. Now AI is coming along and it is getting better literally every minute. Every single word that is input into it makes it better. And also they're uploading a lot of current author books to learn their style, which is a whole other discussion and the reason you should join the Authors Guild, whether you're published or not, because they're fighting against that. But that's an aside. Your feelings about AI and the productivity of these machines creating books are totally valid. I get it and I understand it, but here's the thing.
We all have a purpose. Don't you think, Detective?
I've worked with AI a lot in my job. I'll use it to create handouts from my transcripts. I'll use it to give me the basis of a PowerPoint. It's not that smart yet. Like, it doesn't put any feeling into anything. It doesn't really get it. It's kind of clunky and it's just not there. It's not something I think a machine can do. Now, maybe they'll be able to learn. I don't know. I watched iRobot too. I think that there is always going to be a demand for really compelling novels. And AI can maybe create a cool plot, but they cannot create a character with depth who really struggles to overcome their feelings of guilt or self-recrimination or their fears of being abandoned. All of those different real human complexities are what makes for a compelling novel. Absolutely, without question, it's the hardest part for writers to create. But if it's hard for me as a human, imagine how hard it is for a machine that doesn't feel anything. So I don't think your job is going anywhere anytime soon. And I think the goal there is to really put more into developing the emotional side of the storyline, which is what I talk about all the time on this channel, because the emotion is what connects with the reader. And when the reader connects, the reader comes back. I say it a lot, but it's the truth. Readers don't connect with car chases. Readers connect with flawed characters who work hard to overcome what they're going through. Plain and simple. Sean Gerald asked, what are my thoughts on trilogies and series? And I frankly love them. I've written lots of them, although I had one series that I think I did 7 books total in. And by the time I got to the last one, I was like so sick of that town and that family that I could see why they blew up Walnut Grove at the end of Little House on the Prairie. It was just so maddening to keep coming back to the same people over and over and over again, for me at least, because I didn't get to have that creative license to kind of expand and create all these new worlds. But I think they can be a great way to build readership. And there's a number of things from a marketing perspective that you can do with a series or trilogy. And I say this advice without actually doing it myself because I don't have enough time. But if you have time, you can do like side character profiles or little short stories of like the grocer in the town, or create an extra sideline story with the couple that somebody meets on the page. All of those kinds of things can bring more depth to the world that you have put your trilogy or series in, and readers really eat that up. They love that stuff. It's kind of like the behind the scenes stuff that you see after a series runs on HBO. The thing with writing a trilogy or series, though, is to assume the readers have not read any of the other books. You want to make it so that each of them can stand alone. Even if this is an avid reader who has read all of them, a lot of times they've read a bunch of other books in between and they may forget. Like, for instance, when I started watching Dexter Resurrection, it's only been like a year since Dexter New Blood and a few other years since the original Dexter. But I still forgot a lot of things, and I had to go back and like Google them or rewatch episodes just so I could remember who these characters were. So you need to write the book as if it's going to stand all by itself, and your readers do not know who these other characters are. But they can be a great way to hook readers into becoming long-term readers. Truth Will Set You Free said that they downloaded my plot handout and that it completely changed what they were writing, which can sometimes be super scary, right? Like, oh my God, this is not the story that I thought it was. But I was literally just having a consult with an author where I said, you don't have a plot. You have a lot of emotional things going on, but that means that there's no action. And the reader needs the balance of action and things happening along with the emotional. And plus, the action creates the emotional because the character makes choices and takes actions that bring out their deepest fears or cause consequences that impact them. So those two things have to work hand in hand. And when you redo the plot and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got all these things happening, you also have a structure that gives you basically a GPS to write your book, which is awesome. And apparently that's what happened for The Truth Will Set You Free, who said that after doing the plot chart, the book now seemed doable and made sense. And that's what structure does. I've said this before on the channel, but when you build a house, you have to have a blueprint. Like, even if you know how houses work, you have to have some kind of a blueprint so you know how long to make the rafters and how big to make the walls. You need that structure so that you can create the framework that then becomes all of the other beautiful things you have imagined. So whether you do your plotting ahead of time before you start writing or after you've written a few chapters and you've kind of gotten to know the characters doesn't really matter. All I want you to have is some kind of structure so that you have that roadmap to know where to go next. Now, before I get to the last two questions, which kind of go together, I have a couple shout outs to some people on the channel. First off, to Anthony Wheeler, who's a big supporter and commenter in the community, who is always saying some kind of great little wise thing. And he repeated the information that I put in one of my other videos saying, if you can't write it, you can't fix it. And that is absolutely true. If you don't put the words on the page, how are you going to turn them into something beautiful? So I love that Anthony repeated that advice, and kind of just as a reminder to everybody that's reading the comments. And also a shout out to CSB78NM, who watches the channel and published their first book on Amazon. High five, congrats, that's awesome. I'm so excited for you. Now go write another one, because the key to a career is to keep producing amazing books. Now, the last two questions kind of go together. I have a person on the channel who said, I'm struggling with deep third person. And then Hava Alexander asked about how to describe things without using sort of the cliched words. And you're thinking, how does deep third person and show not tell go together? Well, showing instead of telling creates deep third person. And a really well-written deep dive into third person will mean you're showing more than you're telling. Let me explain what I mean by that. When you do a deep dive into third person and you know who your character is, what they do for a living, how the world impacts them, what their worldviews are, all of those different things, how they see the world and how you show it through their point of view changes. For instance, I had a character who was a carpenter in my first book that actually sold. And this is when I realized that deep third person and show not tell go together. And when he looked at things, he saw them through the view of a guy that works with wood and framing and insulation and nails and screws. And the way that he would describe things in his thoughts, the way that I showed what he was seeing, was through that lens. So when he falls in love with the heroine, like at the end of the book, she becomes like the insulation inside of the walls that he has put up around his heart. It's maybe it's a little cliche. Hey, it was my first book. But that's what I mean. That character sees the world through the lens of what their experience is. He's not going to think about it like wrapping him in a warm quilt, because he's a carpenter, he's Guy, he's all of these things that probably is not going to be thinking about grandma's quilt and probably wouldn't even know the word batting or any of those things. When you take your character and you really dive in deep to create their point of view, everything that you show through the lens of their viewpoint on the world is filtered through their experiences, their prejudices, their fears, their insecurities. This was a phenomenal book, by the way. Janelle Brown is one of my favorite authors. And one of the main characters is a recovering alcoholic, and she sees a lot of things through that lens of being a failure in her family's eyes. And that affects how she reacts to things and how she looks at things. She's leaving the house with her niece, and she doesn't tell her mother, who she's living with temporarily, what she's up to. Stirring up trouble, she'd call it. So there we're seeing how the mother views her, because this is through her thoughts. That's what I remained, even now, the troublemaker. I wondered how long Ellie would have to remain missing, this is her sister, before my mother would start to question her trust in my sister's good sense. Now, to the mother, Ellie is the perfect child, and the main character is not. Better to wait until I had firm proof that my sister was involved in something unsavory. And then as she leaves, this is how she views her mother, which is not how Ellie, ironically, views their mother later on in the book. Instead, I left my mother marinating in her own blind optimism, limping back and forth across the kitchen while the healing crystals clacked in her robe pockets. I figured, let her be happy for one more day. The things that the main character notices are the things that reinforce her beliefs about herself until she gets to the point where she is strong enough in the novel to face her. But what these authors do, and what you really want to study, is how they created that feeling of being right inside that character's head. And that is all about looking at the impact. I talk about it all the time, and I actually have a handout linked down below that will help you with that. The impact of what is happening around them on them emotionally, and writing that from the perspective of their lens on the world, their experiences, their viewpoints, their thoughts, their prejudices, all of that. Easy. One trick that I have for doing that is to write it in first person first, even if the book is not going to be in first person, just because sometimes when you're writing it, it sort of comes across more as like a journal, and so you're digging a little bit deeper, and then you can rewrite it in third person if you want to. But if you're writing it and you can interchange I with she or he, then you're probably getting a little bit deeper. And the last question is a fantastic question, and it's honestly one I've been thinking about for a while. Ava Alexander, who's also a frequent commenter on the channel, and I appreciate that, thank you so much, says that she lives 2 miles from the beach, and she struggles with describing things without using the cliched words. Like, if I'm going to describe the ocean, I don't want to use sun, surf, sand, all of that. And I've been thinking about how to explain this to you guys for a while. Even though I have a bunch of videos on show not tell, I'm constantly thinking about how else can I explain this so that you guys can really get it. Jodi Picoult, I have tons of pages folded over and bookmarked in here. She really looks at how can you take something that is ordinary and describe it in a way that calls to mind something else. And in this scene, the main character is telling another character all these secrets that she's been keeping. And at the same time, she's baking bread. So she is doing an action that has an impact on her that, again, comes back to that deep third person point of view, because it is seen through the eyes of a baker and how she is making. Look, and I also have a passage from one of my books that I can share with you guys if you would like, that can show how I did sort of the same thing. I had a baker character in one of my books. I have spent the past 2 hours telling Leo everything Joseph just told me. In between, I have shaped the brioche into a traditional tete, I think that's how you say it, brushed it with an egg wash, and baked it. It's easier for me to talk when my hands are busy. With each word that passes my lips, I feel less heavy. Now that's telling, right? But here's where she shows it, and it's powerful. It is as if I am giving him sentences made of stones, and the more I relay, the more of the burden he is carrying. Brilliant. Sentences made of stones, so you can literally see and feel and touch the weight of her guilt of carrying these secrets as she is giving them to another character. That is show not tell. Now, if you're going to describe something like an ocean, I want you to look for words and ways to describe it that have nothing to do with ocean, so that, let's say somebody has never ever seen an ocean, never ever touched sand. What will they feel? What does the grittiness feel like when you're any other place? Like maybe it's crushed stones, or maybe it's the barley that their mother cooked with, or something like that, something that has a feeling akin to what you're experiencing. And the ocean, think about the vastness. What else is vast? It's hopes, it's dreams, it's air, right? Like lots of other things. When I looked at a tree the other day, I was trying to think about how to explain this to you guys so that I could talk about show not tell. And I looked at all of the road maps that are in a tree. These are avenues for the ants and the butterflies and the caterpillars and the moths and the birds to take. They are different directions that they can take and end up in different destinations. So look for things that remind you of other things, and take a notebook and just jot things down. When you think about alleviating your mental and emotional burdens, hey, those are stones. Those are like putting down stones. So you write that down in a notebook somewhere and you use something like that in your book. It is not easy to show instead of tell. It is not easy to show instead of tell in a unique, memorable. But what I do is I put little page stickies or post-it notes or highlights in the books that I read where I am so blown away by how the author did it. And what that creates in me is a desire to want to try to do the same thing, so that when I write a book, it becomes more powerful and impactful and has a deeper third person and more showing rather than telling, and creates that emotional impact for the reader. So I want you to go down to that ocean, stand there for a long time, and think about all the other things that capture that same essence. The grittiness, the sinking into the sand, the vastness, the blue, all of those things. Make a list of 100 other things that could be compared to that. And that's how you can create a showing instead of telling that is more powerful and more unique. It's not going to be easy, like I said, because nothing about this job is. If you want to write a book that sounds a whole lot better than what AI is doing, if you want to write a book that readers really love, and most of all, if you want this as a career because it is your dream, you got to try harder, you got to dig deeper, you got to get through the really difficult parts of this job and take that book to the next level. It's not easy, but oh my gosh, is it worth it? And if you want more on Show Not Tell, check out this video right here, because this is an entire course that I taught about it for the Author Writing Tube Conference. And if you're struggling with your self-doubt and what's the point, and oh my God, I just got rejected again, let me just say that I have been there. Remember, 10 books in 8 years. But it is possible, and you can. And as always, if you have a question, feel free to drop it down below, and hopefully I get to answer it in a future video. And subscribe and like and share with other writers. I want to read a lot more great books. So tell other writers so that they have the skills and the tools that they need to write really amazing books.